Welcome back. So we would start with session 5 on economic cooperation. This session will discuss issues of trade and investment, trade facilitation, development of value chain in the post-pandemic world. The session would be chaired by Ambassador Gurjit Singh. He is a professor at IIT Indore, and he is former ambassador to Indonesia and ASEAN. We'd also like to welcome all our speakers and our participants. And I request all the participants to kindly type in their questions, their comments on the chat box or use the raise hand option. May I request Ambassador Gurjit Singh to kindly give his opening remarks and conduct the proceedings. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. A very good morning to all of you and a good afternoon to our friends in Southeast Asia. I'm very happy to chair session 5 of the ICWA AIC conference on geopolitical shifts and opportunities, new horizons in India-Southeast Asia relations. So when I heard the previous session, I could see all the challenges being enumerated, but many of the challenges were actually economic. So our session now is not the challenge, it's the opportunity. So I request all the speakers to focus on the opportunity because the challenges have already been clearly delineated. Secondly, I compliment the organizers for labeling it the India-Southeast Asia Conference. They don't call it the India-ASEAN Conference. And this is my point. Where is ASEAN centrality? And unless ASEAN stops being overwhelmed by the challenges and grasps the opportunities that we propose to discuss in this session, ASEAN should watch out for its centrality. Because unless you grasp opportunity, your centrality is going to be questioned. And now coming to the theme of today's session, economic cooperation. So here we are not looking at challenges. We are trying to see what opportunity comes out of these challenges. And this session will discuss issues on trade and investment, trade facilitation, development of value chains in a post-pandemic world, which means we are not discussing history. We are discussing contemporary 2022, post-pandemic times. I really would like the panelists to focus on new ideas. We don't need to hear what China is doing in Southeast Asia. We know. We want to know what India and Southeast Asia can do together, whatever the challenges. And do we do enough? And where are the ideas and the impediments in doing that? So I commend the speakers to please focus on these areas and give us positive feedback on what the organizers have clearly said is the focus of this session 5 on economic cooperation. With those few words, but I hope my message has gone through, I now welcome Dr. Mohammed Masudur Rahman, visiting fellow, Institute of South Asian Studies in Singapore. You have 15 minutes from now, sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your kind introduction. So I will share my PPT if you give me just a few seconds. Okay, can you see my PPT?
Yes, we can see your PPT.
Okay, thank you very much. So, yeah, I will talk about particularly in Singapore-India economic cooperation issues. And before that, I will just give you a brief introduction because I have 15 minutes. What is the outline of this presentation? I will talk about the little bit the background of Singapore-India bilateral relationship, and then the India's very famous policy, Look East policy, briefly discuss and how is linked with the Singapore, that one, And then the important issues, Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreements, the SECA, that is the sign, the FTA between Singapore and India signing 2005. And then I talk about the trade and investment issue between Singapore and India. And then I'll try to discuss a comparative analysis, how Singapore is dealing with, India and China, because the China is 1.4 billion GDP, people, and India is 1.3.5 billion people, too big market, and how, the trade and investment going between these two giant countries. And then I'll talk about little bit the area of differences, particularly Singapore perspectives, and then some future, direction. So this is a quick outline of this presentation. Yes, so we know, we already had a lot of issues talking last 2 days that ASEAN-India bilateral relationship is, not only economic but also cultural and religious linkage. It's more than 1,000 years of, the relationship. And we also heard about the India is a $1.3 billion people of market and 2.9 trillion of economy. Similar to ASEAN is 3.2 trillion of economy, and Singapore is the front runner of ASEAN countries. And India's, the low-cost policy that's initiated by, in 1992 by Narasimha Rao, the PM Narasimha Rao, and that reflects the strategic shift in India's foreign policy that we know. And last 2 days, you talk about this issue a lot of times. And in 1994, this Singapore lecture, PM Narasimha Rao, he categorically mentioned about Singapore, that the closer ties with Singapore are motivated by economic consideration. So that is the one important issues. And then, in 2005, India and Singapore signed FTA. This is called Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, the SECA. So under this SECA, there is, that of course, not only the tariff reduction or elimination, but also investment, like, for example, investment closure, national treatment, closure of investment, and some other issues. And under this SECA, yes, the tariff has been reduced, particularly, some product that is food product, plastic, electronics, pharmaceuticals, that is an important product for both countries. But if you see what happened to the bilateral trade, if you see the bilateral trade between these two countries from 2006 to 2020, of course, 2020 has difficult year due to the pandemic, but until 2019, bilateral trade is around like $15 billion. And India, export like only $6.4 billion, and Singapore export to India around $15 billion. So bilateral trade basically increase, but is compared to 2006 is not that much of trade increase bilaterally. And if compared to I will compare later to how about the China, how in China, Singapore trade with China, if you see, it's much lower, but the trade deficit is around $4 billion, and of course in positive with Singapore. So Indian trade did not increase substantially basically over the years. If you see the Indian export was like around $5 billion in 2006, and in 2020 similar $5 billion. So there are some underlying issue that maybe India need to consider what's going on, why this SECA did not increase trade substantially. So yeah, some we can say the investment has increased. In particularly last year, according to the government data, the Singapore investment like $15.8 billion, which is 20% of total inflow in Singapore, in India. So that is one issue. So India recently started receiving FDI from Singapore, and cumulative investment is quite high now. and trade increase, but not substantially. But from the Singapore side, yes, around 97,000 Singaporean are working, in different company, Singapore-based company in India. So from this perspective, from Singapore perspective, is a huge and is a huge beneficial from Singapore perspective, and also for Indian. Around in 2022, around 9,000 Indian companies are operating in Singapore. So there are, some significant improvement regarding investment and, bilateral trade over the years. I just talk about a little bit if you compare with the trade between Singapore and China and Singapore and India, if you see, because the both countries, China and India, the similar GDP and similar kinds of socioeconomic situation. Indian trade with Singapore was like $12 billion or $13 billion in 2026, and now is around $15 billion. So you see, the bilateral trade did not increase over the years substantially. But if you compare with China, Singapore trade with China, Singapore trade with China was $53 billion 2006, and now 2020 is around $99 billion. So it's around double. So China, managed to trade with Singapore is double, but say India did not actually increase the trade, with Singapore over the years. But recently, service sector has increased substantially. Similar to investment, if you see the Singapore investment in India is recently, like last year, it was a huge investment, $15.8 billion by Singapore. That was huge, but over the years, the growth is much lower compared to China. So that is the other issues why Singapore investment is lower, in India compared to China. So that is some issues that India need to dig in details. So I'll talk about a little bit the area of differences. So that is my issues that I wanted to highlight here. One issue, of course, the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. That is the key issues of divergence. India, at the last moment withdrew from this RCEP, but China, Singapore is very keen. Last year in 2020, in our book launching program here in Singapore, the book name is India on Our Minds. So this is one of our colleague, edited this book. In this launching program, Singapore Prime Minister Lee expressed his hope that India would revisit the merits of joining RCEP. So see how Singapore perceiving India's like joining RCEP and other regional cooperation arrangement. Second issues is the Quad. It makes the relationship with ASEAN country, India's relation to ASEAN country, especially Singapore and some other countries, more complicated. Some countries, they don't want to see this kinds of security issues, but and this makes more complicated the situation. So that see few issues that are the differences with Singapore. And regarding the future, yes, the future is the e-commerce and digital connectivity in the future, game changer. That is the most important. If you compare the Singapore, digital and connectivity with Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, China, that is it is huge compared to India. So the connectivity, e-commerce is the key issues that can connect and increase bilateral trade between Singapore and India. And different area like ride sharing, e-commerce, mobile gaming, financial technology, that could be the potential area of cooperation between these two countries. So that is the one. Second is the India intends to build 100 smart cities. So yes, that's very important for Indian development. And Singapore could be important partner. Already Singapore, one company, Subarna Jurong, then assisting this smart city development in Maharashtra. So that is the, the way the Singapore start to, assisting Indian development process. So that's mean if you see the bilateral relationship between Singapore and India is a centuries of 1,000 years of bilateral relationship, both cultural, religious, people to people linkage. But if you see that trade and investment is not increase at that the same rate, or that's the expected rate. So the huge trade and investment potential between these two countries, but there are some issues that maybe did not realize this trade and investment. So that need to be serious effort to increase the bilateral trade and investment. So I think I will finish here, and I will answer the question and answer later.
Thank you very much, particularly for sticking to the time without a reminder.
Yeah.
So your presentation focused only on Singapore, which is the gold standard of India's economic cooperation with Southeast Asia. It is the best of the relationships, the most organized. And Singapore is the ultimate free trader. They are happiest to make zero value trade on everything. But the rest of Southeast Asia is not like Singapore. And they have many tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. So that is something we will need to look at if we need to go ahead. You did talk about RCEP. So that is where Singapore and ASEAN countries have the same approach. You all pray that one day India will join RCEP. But when India was negotiating RCEP, we have to be honest. ASEAN countries did not stand with us to push back on China. So this is what I said in the beginning. ASEAN centrality has a cost of responsibility. And you must bear that. You can't simply think India will keep standing with you at a cost India has to bear. ASEAN has to share that cost. Singapore is a great center for capital, and investments flow out of Singapore even if they are not Singapore financing. Singapore is really the hub of finance in Southeast Asia. Now, how much do Indian companies use Singapore to invest in ASEAN? No clear study on this has come. Inverse, how much does Singapore promote ASEAN investment in India? Again, no clear study. But I think your institute could look into this. There are two other areas where the current opportunities are rising. Cooperation in South Pacific, cooperation in Africa, where Singapore funds have been working with private Indian companies, but there is a much bigger scope for doing this. Since Singapore is the ultimate free trader, I think we need to look at this and not just wait for government things. But thank you very much for your very cogent presentation and setting the ball rolling for this session. I thank you for it. I now have great pleasure in inviting Dr. Watcharas Leelawath, advisor, Bolliger and Company, Bangkok, and a former executive director of the Mekong Institute. You have 15 minutes, sir.
Very much, Ambassador Singh, for your kind introduction. I'd like to thank Indian Council for World Affairs and ASEAN India Center at the IIS for inviting me to participate in this forum. Let me share my screen. Okay, so my presentation today will be on the trade and investment opportunity between ASEAN and India. And I would like to focus on the existing economic cooperation framework that involve Thailand and India together. Let me give you the brief information about Thailand's economic cooperation with other countries in the world. Yeah, at the moment, Thailand has 14 FTA with 18 countries, and mostly the FTA that Thailand have is with Asian country. Of course, India is we have the bilateral Thailand and India FTA, and we are also involved in the ASEAN India FTA, and we have two bilateral FTA with the countries in Latin America, which is Peru and Chile. And this is the this slide show the Thailand's trade with the FTA partner. Actually, we trade about the volume of trade of Thailand with the 18 FTA partner is about 63%, and the rest 37% is like about with the trade with 100 more than 100 non-FTA partners. So we can see that with the FTA, Thailand has a significant effect on the Thailand's trade with our trading partners. And from the information in 2020, India share with Thailand trade is only 2.7%. And this is a lot. We have a lot of more room to grow. Now, the framework agreement involve India and Thailand are the following. As I mentioned, Thailand-India FTA. This is the first FTA that first bilateral FTA that Thailand has. Our first FTA is with ASEAN. ASEAN Free Trade Area that was effective in 2003, and later on we have the Thailand-India FTA and ASEAN-India FTA. But at that time, the coverage is only 82 products. But later on, we have the ASEAN-India FTA. It's entered into force in 2010. This is only for goods trade, and it's covering about 5,000 products. And services and investment agreement are effective in July 2015. Another regional framework that we have with India is BIMSTEC, the Bay of Bengal multi-sectoral and technical and economic cooperation. BIMSTEC is one of the mechanisms that can link South Asia and Southeast Asia together. So, and of course, as you know, that is started in 1997, focused on many 14 priority area, agricultural, fishery, and poverty reduction. And Thailand at the moment, Thailand assumed the chairmanship of the BIMSTEC in 2021 and 2020. And of course, Thailand will push forward for our national agenda on the circular and green economy. Another framework agreement, this is involved the Mekong country. When you talk about Mekong country, there are 5 Mekong countries in Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, and this is countries in the lower Mekong. But if you talk about the greater Mekong, we include 2 provinces in China, which are Yunnan and Guangxi. So the Mekong Ganga Corporation is initiated in July 2000 in Bangkok, and the objective is to promote economic cooperation and connectivity in Mekong sub-region. Mekong Ganga Corporation is another one of the cooperation between Mekong countries with our development partner. We have, apart from Mekong Ganga Corporation, we have Mekong Lan Chang Corporation, that is Mekong country and India. We also have Mekong US partnership, which is of course between US and Mekong countries, and US use the Mekong and US partnership as the mechanism to counterbalance the influence of China in Mekong region. Besides Mekong Lan Chang, Mekong US, we also have Mekong Korea, Mekong Japan Corporation, and I heard that they're going to there will be the Mekong Australia Corporation in the near future. The cooperation framework on Mekong Ganga Corporation focus on 7 areas: tourism, culture, education, transport, health, agriculture, and development of the MSME. So those are the those 4 cooperation framework are the existing cooperation mechanism that Thailand has with India. And if we look at the trade between Thailand and India, this is the data from 2014 2020. We see actually from 2014 2020, the bilateral trade between Thailand and India is about 10 to 12 billion US dollar. So this is about 2.7% of the Thailand trade with the world. But when you look at the, as I mentioned, that there's a lot more room to grow if some, we have the opportunity if the challenges in many areas has been addressed. If you look at the FTA utilization rate, it is about 40% to 60%, which is considered not high. Of course, it can be high if you compare to other framework, economic cooperation framework, but it should have been higher. I want to say the FTA utilization rate reached 90% or 80%. So with the low, not so high FTA utilization, we can say it reflects the difficulty for trading and using the tariff preference between Thailand and India, either in the form of bilateral Thailand-India FTA or ASEAN-India FTA. And what we can do is here is that Mekong Ganga cooperation framework can play the role in building the capacity of the MSME and SME in both India and Thailand and other Mekong countries to be aware on the benefit that they're going to get from the bilateral FTA and ASEAN India FTA, and also upgrade the ASEAN and India cooperation, ASEAN India FTA by involving the self-certification scheme or the self-certification. This is the way to facilitate trade between Thailand and India. So we can see that there is the opportunity for trade between the 2 countries, Thailand, India, and India or ASEAN as a whole to improve. Another framework cooperation is the BIMSTEC. As I mentioned that BIMSTEC is one of the mechanisms that link South Asia and Southeast Asia together. 2 countries in ASEAN is in BIMSTEC, which are Thailand and Myanmar. And Myanmar is the only country in ASEAN that share the border with India. So with the development of the physical infrastructure and regulatory connectivity, there will be the opportunity to enhance trade and investment between India and Thailand and also ASEAN. So BIMSTEC master plan for transport connectivity. This is the, as you all aware that BIMSTEC has been initiated in a long time ago in 1997, and the BIMSTEC master plan for transport connectivity has been endorsed at the fifth BIMSTEC summit in Colombo last March, so a few months ago. And at that time, we see during the past 5 years, we see a lot of progress for the BIMSTEC cooperation framework. So for the transport connectivity, so the master plan for the BIMSTEC master plan for connectivity has been developed with the technical assistance from ASEAN, Asian Development Bank, and the primary objective of this master plan is to push forward for tightening economic integration within BIMSTEC as well as BIMSTEC and ASEAN region through improving transport linkage and border crossing throughout South Asia and Southeast Asia. And the master plan, as I mentioned, that it has been adopted in March 2022. It is the guiding document for BIMSTEC member states to taking strategic action to enhance and upgrade all modes of transportation. The key identified coverage of the BIMSTEC master plan are roads and road transport, railway and rail transport, ports and maritime transport, inland water transport, airport development, multimodal, intermodal transport, trade facilitation, and human resource development. So you can see that with this transport connectivity plan, it includes all modes of transportation, also the linkage between multi-modal transportation as well. Oops. Sorry. There's something wrong with that.
Oh,
So you are muted.
Can you hear me?
So yeah, 1 minute. That's what the chair is saying.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, I will jump to the conclusion. And so the way forward is, of course, it's the possibility for the India to come back to RCEP is very slim. So what we can do is to review and upgrade ASEAN-India FTA, expand the products coverage, self-certification scheme, also the agreement to promote the e-commerce between India and to ASEAN. Another thing is the physical connectivity and regulatory connectivity. Implement the BIMSTEC master plan for transport connectivity and transport agreement under BIMSTEC, such as the improve the transparency at the border, use the digital technology for trade facilitation, promote cross-border provincial cooperation. So this is have to be must be the very tight relationship between the government, local government at the provincial area, at the border area, along the India, Myanmar, Thailand corridor. And also another thing is the It's very important, and it's the big role for the Mekong Ganga Corporation to provide capacity building for local stakeholder, especially the MSME and SME in the region, and also the logistics service provider in the region. With this, I would like to stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I think that was another outstanding presentation, and I particularly liked your conclusions. So I must say we eagerly look forward to the Thai chairmanship of BIMSTEC. So I'm sure you will do many of the things that you mentioned today, and I would strongly urge Thailand to create a fund which is funded by all partners or outside agencies to pursue this agenda. There is also an outstanding line of credit from India of $1 billion, which lies unutilized. And perhaps that could be utilized for infrastructure under the BIMSTEC, because that is meant for India-ASEAN work. You very nicely pointed out through statistics the importance of FTA and how Thailand has used it so well. And the most eloquent slide of yours was to show how little Indian companies actually use the FTA. And that is why the FTA utilization of Thai imports is actually so low, because your companies are actually much smarter. I am, however, not sure about the genesis of all this. You know, India-ASEAN trade, despite the FTA now 15 years, is $77 billion. India-Africa trade, no FTA, is $70 billion. So in a wider world, it is not the FTA, it is the complementarity and the cost effectiveness which is actually important, and the FTA only stimulates that. Now, I want to mention that in India, there seems to be dissatisfaction with the implementation of the India-ASEAN FTA. And you have in conclusion mentioned it needs a review and what needs the review. But I think you need to add one point, recreate the trust. Because in India, many people believe that ASEAN countries are channeling Chinese goods into India using the FTA. And that is not an acceptable practice. And I think ASEAN is also going too slow, bureaucratically slow in reviewing the ITGA. And I think we need to look that. But sir, I deeply value your presentation. I learned much from it, as I did from the previous one. Thank you for complimenting us today. Now I have great pleasure in inviting Professor Priyoranjan Singh and Dr. Bishwanjit Singh, both from the University of Manipur in Imphal. You have the floor, sir, for the next 15 minutes. I would sometimes suggest to presenters to please begin with the end of your presentation first. Give us the ideas and then come back to the analysis. Sometimes it just makes for a better discussion. Thank you. Yes, sir. Please start.
Sorry, okay. Sorry, I just have a technical issue. I'm sharing my screen.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Respected chair, panelists, and dignitaries. Today, we would like to present our paper titles "Bridging Myanmar Northeast India Missing Link and Promoting Cross-Border Value Chain in India-ASEAN Region in the Post-Pandemic." India-ASEAN region, by which we mean South Asia and Southeast Asia. This paper is about developing the prospect of value chain in the post-pandemic. There is an increase in inter-regional trade across Asia, and there is more trade in intermediate goods and distribution of production process across Asia. However, in this very vital India-ASEAN region, value chains have not been developed as much as it is desired. Most importantly, there are very few studies of regional economies, localized cluster of industrial activities, firm strategy in India-ASEAN cross-border region. Therefore, it profits a comprehensive view of the larger cross-border structure that exists or are coming to exist in the regional economy. So therefore, in the India-ASEAN region, value chain and production network needs to emerge, particularly on the lane route across the trilateral highway. We believe that on the Myanmar and Northeast India are the missing link in any future vision of lane-based economic integration and cooperation in the South Asia and Southeast Asian region. As far as India, ASEAN, and Indo-Myanmar trade are concerned, the weakest unachieved trade is lane-based trade. The lane-based trade is neglected in India's against policy. Until and unless Northeast India and Myanmar develop a value chain link, the lane-based trade cannot be defined on the trilateral highway. We focus on textile and clothing industry because this sector employs more than 40 million workers, contribute $601 billion in export across Asia. So in short, then in 2019, 10 out of the 20 largest clothing exporters are from Asia. And these 10 exporting countries produce about 42% of the world garment. So in short, Asia is the clothing factory of the world. Beside that, textile and clothing industry is a leisure intra-Asian trade. There is a leisure intra-Asian trade in this sector. For example, Saudi Asia export only 1% to the other Asian countries, and in intra-ASEAN trade is only about 2%. So we believe in the post-pandemic, this sector can be a lead sector to develop lane-based value chain link for both Myanmar and Northeast India, as well as India and ASEAN. Let's have a look on a perspective on the relation between GVC and development. Integration into the world economy through GVC leads to a higher economic growth and a reduced poverty reduction. For example, through GVC participation, Vietnam's per capita income increases from just merely $288 in 1995 to 2,546 in 2018. Likewise, Indonesia's GDP is triple. And let's talk about the policy differences between adopting import substitution policy and export substitution policy. We can see Thailand and Malaysia. Thailand became a significant exporter of auto value added through export-oriented GVC, whereas Malaysia adopted protectionist policy in the same industry and failed to compete for its own auto brand. Similarly, the Japan, South Korea, Taiwan had also developed their high-tech sector through extensive use of imported inputs and services through GVC participation. A classic example of the benefit of participating in textile and clothing-based GVC is Pakistan and Bangladesh. In 1990, Bangladesh exported around 1 billion, while Pakistan exported 4 billion. However, after the participation in the GVC, Bangladesh in 2019 per capita income exceeded Pakistan GDP per capita income through deepening and expanding GVC participation. Now, against this background, the paper highlights where do we put Northeast India and Myanmar within this dynamics of ASEAN and India relationship, how to connect the missing link on land between Northeast India and Southeast Asia in the post-pandemic from the value chain perspective, and can this sector take a major role in kickstart a lane-based value chain networks across the region. For that, we adopted two indicators of GBC significance. One is trade in parts and components, and another is the unit value analysis to examine the significance of cross-border production network in the India-ASEAN region in the textile and clothing industry. And we divided ASEAN into three groups based on their per capita income. One is ASEAN 1, which represents the high-income countries, includes Singapore and Malaysia. ASEAN 2, which represent middle-income countries, include Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And ASEAN 3, the CLMB countries. But we exclude Brunei as its economy is highly dependent on oil products. So bilateral trade has been largely in favor of ASEAN. India has the highest trade deficit in 2021 with ASEAN 2, followed by ASEAN 1. And India has a trade surplus with ASEAN 3 over the years. However, in the last 3 years, which is 2018, 19, 20, India has suffered India has trade deficit with ASEAN 3 as well. So regarding the bilateral trade with the textile and clothing bilateral trade, India, this is the export of India. India export with the most exported product with ASEAN 1 is apparel, 47%. With ASEAN 2 is cotton, and with ASEAN 3 also cotton. So in short, cotton dominate ASEAN 2 and ASEAN 3. Regarding the imports, India's import to these three ASEAN groups, with ASEAN 1, wedding is dominated. With ASEAN 2, MMSF and MMF multi-man-made fiber is dominated. With ASEAN 3, apparel dominates. Now, let's see the regional production sharing between India and ASEAN. For that, we divided into total trade of textile and clothing into parts and component and final goods. So this is the table, the share of parts and components imports from ASEAN 3 from 1998 to 2021, percentage share. As we see, the share of parts and component in imports has dominated the trade pattern from 1998 to 2021. However, it's a slightly decreasing in all these three countries growth. Share in PC is ASEAN 1 is 91%, 90% in ASEAN 1, 91% in ASEAN 2, 72% in ASEAN 3. So the declining PC imports of India from ASEAN 3 group shows that significant rise in final goods import. However, as I said, share of part and component remains still high at 90%, 91%, and 72% with this three region. This is the export of part and component to ASEAN 3 groups. The share of part and components in export exhibit different pattern. I mean, on the one hand, there is a fall in export of part and component to ASEAN 1 by 17% from 1998 to 2021. On the other hand, there is a rise in export of part and components in ASEAN 2 by 14%, ASEAN 3 by 22%. So one interesting finding here is that there is a similarity in parts and components share figure on the export and import sides across the region. It indicates that there are overlapping specialization pattern in part and component assembly across the country in the region. However, it is expected that Indian-made product and ASEAN-made products are heterogeneous, which is different in quality and prices. To verify this, we compare the unit value of the same products in Indian-made export to ASEAN 3 and ASEAN 1 export to India using the same ISIS 6-digit code. The second column is the total number of common ISIS code that India and ASEAN export to 3. It increases from 27 to 107. The number of cheaper Indian-made part and component increases from 19 in 2000 to 42 in 2021. And the percentage of cheaper made PC decreases from 17% to 39% in 2000 from 2000 to 2021, which indicates that India export of costlier goods to ASEAN 3 has consistently increased. Therefore, CLMV are major players in the global textile and clothing value chain, with which country India has a robust value chain. This finding suggests that ASEAN and India IFTA is integrating the region along in the line of global value chain. Such a deepening parent component trade helps each other in fighting poverty reduction in the region. For example, India's cotton helps to reduce poverty in Indonesia. So that's the classic example of that. So therefore, the prospect of a textile and clothing value chain on the trilateral highway linking ASEAN and the northeast region of India is a distinct prospect. Let's see the ground reality of the Indo-Myanmar border trades. India's foreign trade on the land customs stations at the border have come to a standstill, but informal trade continues to boom. For example, based on the Ministry of Commerce government of Myanmar, there is a 201 million US dollar bilateral trade in 2018, which is accounted for only 2% of the total bilateral trade in 2018. With this rising trade in final goods, the trade in intermediate goods and services have been taken routes across the border, creating nations' value chains between neighboring regions of Jagain in Myanmar and Manipur in India. For example, in timber, livestock and feeds, poultry, fisheries, labor, etc. Other prospect industry are food and fruit processing industry. Cement production is in the Assam-Bangladesh border. Gems and semi-precious stones and health sector. In addition to it, supply chain network of transport, warehouses have already and other logistics already existed across the border, connecting Guangzhou, China, Mysore, Thailand, and to Mori in Myanmar. In short, a labor-based value chain is first emerging in the textile, timber-based industry, and construction between Myanmar and Jagain region. How to formalize this trade and a value chain on the trilateral highway? India and Myanmar have to formulate a long-term policy and border trade mechanism, and that ensures seamless trade flows and development of value chain along the trilateral highway. And policy framework emerged from India and Myanmar dialogue and joint academic research output of University of the two countries, regional and inter-regional appropriate forum of Northeast India and Northern Myanmar must emerge for focus at coordinated planning and outcome. India and ASEAN have to initiate border trade, specific dialogue on economic corridors and trade. So for that to happen, we strongly believe that textile and clothing zones at existing LCSS can play a lead role in the formalization of existing informal value chain and trade flows. For this to happen, in the post-pandemic Myanmar and India bilateral free trade agreement and a new border trade agreement must emerge beside better grounding of India-ASEAN FTA. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor. I must confess that your analysis backed by data was extremely impressive. And you have shown a lot of generic stuff as well as specific stuff to the issue at hand. Your conclusion that in order for the trilateral highway to actually have meaning, you must have these industrial zones and a new bilateral FTA and border trade agreement must emerge, which means first, we must have these industrial zones on the Indian side. Otherwise, the trilateral highway is becoming an invitation for Thailand to export through Myanmar into India. And there is a little balance here. There is no perfidy. It is simply the lack of Indian capacity. So the trilateral highway is meant to raise the economic profile of Northeast India. And from somehow there, we have been lacking. Now, you have rightly pointed out the importance of that with Myanmar. Now, this is true because an India-Myanmar arrangement will almost be standing by itself. Because if you cannot compete with Thailand for the Myanmar market, except through a specialized border trade arrangement, as you have mentioned. So, moving beyond that, how do we create complementarities in this particular case between India and Thailand, and in a wider case with India and ASEAN? Now, we know the trouble in the world, we know China, we know. So these resilient supply chains, which are China plus one alternatives, is an opportunity for India and ASEAN countries to work together. It is not a common ASEAN position. This is where India in particular groups and sectors has to work with ASEAN individual countries who have got, and your statistics showed this, as did the earlier presentation from Thailand, where the complementarities can be established. For instance, the auto chain with Thailand. But you know, there is almost no relationship between auto production in India and in Thailand. Whereas with Indonesia, the Japanese companies use the India-ASEAN FTA to export and to Indonesia and get other parts from Indonesia for their models in India. Now, this can happen on pharmaceuticals. This can happen on, value-added goods in electronics. It has to move beyond cotton. I mean, let's be honest. For the Northeast, cotton is important. But for the wider complementarity, I think you need to move into technology. You need to move into pharmaceuticals, vaccine delivery. These are the new opportunities which are coming. But we cannot forget that the Northeast needs this. That is why I have been a votary that there should be another India-ASEAN corridor, which should link the Mysuru, Bengaluru, Chennai industrial corridor overseas into Indonesia and Thailand, and perhaps when in better times now to Vladivostok. And that will create an alternate chain much beyond what India and ASEAN ever imagined. So thank you for patiently listening to me. I have now great pleasure in inviting, last but not least, Professor Biswajit Nag of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, New Delhi. Sir, you have 15 minutes from now.
Thank you, Ambassador, and I hope I'm audible. Okay, good. And I also would like to thank the organizers for the invitation. As I'm the last speaker, so I have the disadvantage and advantages. Disadvantage, everything has been said about the economic cooperations and relationship among the countries. And also I have the advantage because I also started thinking through, just like a normal researcher, that what else I can add. So I will focus on the global value chain aspect of economic cooperation between India and Southeast Asia. However, as the Ambassador mentioned, that why don't you first tell us about your conclusion? So I have a few working slides, but before going to the working slides, I'll just tell my conclusion, okay? So that, I can create my argument more cohesively. Ambassador also mentioned in the beginning that we are in 2022, we are in post-pandemic time, so we need to think differently. And also in these last 2 days discussions, there are a lot of which have been shared or discussed. So one of the most important things which I, as a researcher, I feel between India and Southeast Asia is lacking is basically the knowledge and capability of India. That itself, in most part of Southeast Asia, is not very clear. So that's why there is a basic tendency to fall on some other players, including China. There could be historical reasons as well. Many companies actually, for example, Japanese company, in their divisional divide, they consider India with West Asia. They never consider India with the part of Southeast Asia. And that's why there's a historical reason that Japanese global value chain actually didn't come up in India in general. But in tomorrow's world, there are a few areas actually the global value chain can be developed, or rather we can think of. One of them is basically about the climate change solutions and the green energy. because there should be possible collaborations in terms of development of the capital goods and also development of several services in which a lot of companies can actually come together. In case of digital trade or digital issues, for example, in fintech, health tech, agri-tech, there are a lot of possibilities. Yesterday, we heard that India's UPI is having right now a collaborations with the Singaporean player. So there could be other countries as well that who could actually collaborate with us in this area. So there is a new kind of global value chain coming up. So, and the last point here in my conclusion, I'd like to highlight about the cooperation in skills and education. Here at IIFT, before pandemic, we were having close collaborations with CLMB countries. So a lot of young participants as well as young government officers are coming, staying here in Delhi, and also learning about India. And we had used that opportunity to connect with the governments for a lot of business purposes, because we teach business education, so exporters, importers, investors always want to know that which are the new ways actually can come up. Having said that, let me just share some of my slides. So these slides are a bit working slides, not very well organized, because I thought while listening the other presentations since morning, I thought that this could be some kind of a useful purpose. So here is my slides. I hope it is visible. Yeah, somebody should tell me that whether it is visible. Yeah, okay. Great. Great. So I'm using a newly developed an website by United Nations and Asian Development Bank called Regional Integration and Value Chain Analyzer, called RIVA. So if there are some researchers, so they can actually go to this RIVA site and actually can download all this. In fact, I didn't do much of research, but rather actually I just, because for the talking point, I need to tell you some numbers. So that's why I went there, and I thought that, it is better that if I can just share some of the slides. So first I will show it from Southeast Asia's perspective. I'm not saying it ASEAN, because in the website, I didn't find ASEAN as a group, and I also didn't get time to create a group of countries of 10. But it is more or less the same, because these are all estimated figures. So what is global value chain? Global value chain is you are importing component, you are adding values, and you are sending to other countries, and that countries are using those as an intermediate goods and exporting further. So we look at as a backward linkage and the forward linkage. So backward linkage is mostly the foreign production used in my country's exports. So if you look at Southeast Asia, this is a 2017 data. So we have roughly around 27% of Southeast Asian exports are coming from some other countries. So suppose Southeast Asia is exporting the value of $100, so $27 is actually coming from other countries. So that we need to understand. Almost 1/4 of Southeast Asia's exports are actually originated in other countries. So the question is that whether India is really playing an important part in that 27%, right? On the other hand, if you look at from the forward linkage, that means Southeast Asians exports are being used as intermediate goods in other countries in exports. So almost 16% of the Southeast Asia's gross exports, which is close to $230 billion, is actually going as a forward linkage. So other countries are using this $230 billion as their input. So in 21st century's trade is mostly a trade in fragmented production. If any country thinks that I'll make the product from the scratch, then it's basically living in a fool's paradise, because different countries are having different level of sophistication in terms of competitive advantage. If you look at Southeast Asia, which are the sectors actually they are having a backward linkages, and which are the sectors they are having a forward linkages. So if you look at the biggest sector here is a computer and electronic component and fuel. Here, actually, India plays a very important role, and trading and water transport. In case of forward linkages, again, computer. So China plays a very important role here, and India plays a very important role here. And then there are food and beverages and fuels. Also, India play an important role here. Singapore, Indonesia actually are the main players in the fuel global value chain. Now, if you look at the country level, so India is among the top 5 countries in the backward value chain of Southeast Asia. So that's a great thing. So though the percentage is very small, is less than 1%, but still India is present there. So that means India is an important player for Southeast Asia. From India, they were importing. Whether we are able to exploit this, whether able to use this opportunity to create more cooperation is an important thing. On the other hand, the biggest market for Southeast Asian goods are definitely China and Japan and Korea, and then actually within Southeast Asia, Malaysia and Singapore. If you look at further, that what are the products in which actually India is closely related, and I think I just mentioned that fuel. That's the fuel is the most important thing, but trading and the computer and electric component is also an important thing for Southeast Asia to source from India. Further, another important thing that how Southeast Asia's exports are basically connected to the India produce imports. So intermediate domestic productions, what actually India is exporting is close to 56%. So what India is exporting, almost 50% is being consumed there, and foreign products as consumed by the importer is around 23%. Now, which are the countries actually in Asia are very important from India's perspective? So to understand this particular diagram, first you look at this small box here. Here actually is the source country, and then source country is India. And from here, we are going to the exporting economy, which is Southeast Asia. And from there, Southeast Asia is exporting, and how much is coming back to India. So what is the circularity? That means India is exporting, some value addition is happening in Southeast Asia, and then it is coming back to India. This is a true nature of trade integrations or a regional value chain, what we say. So if you look at here, the most important player here is basically where actually the Southeast Asian goods going after they're importing from India. So they're importing from India, they're processing it, and they're sending it to the rest of the world. So only 3%, 3.1.4% actually coming back to India. So most of the exports what India is making to Southeast Asia as an intermediate goods, a significant part of them are going to China, almost 13%, and then 7% is actually 7.5% actually Japan. So this is the way actually the Indian goods going there. So I'm looking at this from a Southeast Asia's perspective. We can actually think it from India's perspective when we consider India as the exporter. So if you look at from the India's perspective, then produced in India, used in Southeast Asian exports, that percentage is around 41%. So what India is actually exporting, 41% are intermediate goods. So that's a kind of, though the value is very small, but the percentage is quite promising. That's the thing actually I want to highlight in this slide. So where does this import content coming from? So if you look at here, in case of India, what actually India is exporting to Southeast Asia, a significant part is actually coming from China. So from China, we are importing, we are processing it, we are sending it to Southeast Asia, right? And we have, and the second player, actually, you can see it, Indonesia. With Indonesia, with Singapore, we are having relatively closer relationship in Southeast Asia. So what is the final results coming out of it? Singapore is an important player for us. Indonesia, important player for us. Okay. So Thailand is also an important player. Now, what is actually missing is the smaller players. So Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. These or what we call CLMV country, including Myanmar, could be a kind of a basis for Southeast Asian new value chain where actually we can invest and we can create some kind of a collaborations. I think, several experts before me talked about this particular aspect. So what is my conclusion? So my conclusion is that India is still a small player in Southeast Asia, right? Still in terms of value chain. They are too much overwhelmed by Chinese presence, but it is not the case that India is not present there. It is not the case that India's presence is not increasing. So I think this momentum needs to be sustained. And that's why we require a lot of thinking process rather than just initially thinking of an investment. So in my understanding, still, India as a critical player, that concept is still at a very nascent stage in Southeast Asia, except some countries like Singapore and Indonesia. Okay, so this particular aspect, I think, it's a softer issue where actually both governments and, the knowledge traders, everyone need to work on it. And at the same time, we require more investment. So investment from Southeast Asia in India is quite encouraging. We require investment in the trade facilitation. I think many speakers before me highlighted more bureaucratic challenges in both sides, and a movement towards the paperless trade in the region should be encouraged, and share of knowledge as an important thing to improve the situation. There is a new concept called servification of the manufacturing process. So the manufacturing in the entire manufacturing, only the manufacturing part is very monotonic, and you just require a machine and to prepare the components, and you require an assembly place and to assemble. What is important here? The services which are binding this manufacturing process. So this certification of manufacturing process is giving us a new opportunity, as Ambassador talked about opportunity. This is a new opportunity where actually we can link the production process through some kind of a service link. The last 2 points, innovation value chain, which is an interesting thing, because in most of the European countries, the innovation value chain is right now working because the laboratories in different countries are working together, universities are working together, governments are working together, and private sectors are also working together. So we also require in Southeast Asia and India some kind of an innovation value chain kind of a concept. So like Department of Science and Technology or other governments, department, including trade and industry, they can actually work with the HRD ministry to develop collaborations with the good universities and creating lab in both sides, so that jointly actually we can think of some product and then commercialize it through investment. And the last point, everything is done if the logistics and warehouses, I think my previous speaker talked about it. If that part was not been looked after, then definitely the trade value will come down. So what is most important here? To create an ecosystem, we have a good science of collaborations, integrations, co-creations. We require a kind of a push, both from the private sector and the government, both sides. And that could be the new age collaboration between ASEAN and India we can think of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Nag, for another brilliant presentation. And you brought out so many new things, including a very detailed analysis of how small a player India is in Southeast Asian value chains. And you rightly pointed out that that is where the opportunity is. Nowadays, value chains are becoming strategic. So India, Japan, and Australia talk about a strategic, resilient value chain. So we need to have individual ASEAN countries engage with India on these strategic value chains with the conscious idea of setting up China plus one alternates. I think there was a question to this end. How do we do this? That is unclear because there is a India-ASEAN Business Council, but I think that only meets alongside the summits and then it sort of lapses. We need a more vibrant engagement, and I don't think we need to do it with the whole of ASEAN, because the previous presentation showed ASEAN 1, 2, and 3. They're all not the same. So we should do it with places where we can build these complementarities, and this should be led by Indian entrepreneurs who should tell the government where to start. So this India Development Initiative towards Southeast Asia must take this into account. And we have enough money through the India-ASEAN Fund to do this. We do many things repetitively there. It's high time we focused on result-oriented impact and came across and implement some of the ideas that the four eminent panelists have done today. Now we are left with a little bit of time, so there are a few questions. One question is from Sripati Narayanan. How do we find synergy in India's ties with Southeast Asia, given the fact that there are multiple platforms of engagements like BIMSTEC, Mekong, Ganga, which go beyond bilateral and ASEAN mechanisms? Would our professor from Thailand like to answer that?
Yes, thank you very much, Ambassador. Yeah, I see this cooperation mechanism as the complementary to one another. For example, like ASEAN India FTA is the platform, is the mechanism to reduce the barrier to trade and investment between ASEAN and India. So it is the mechanism to create the better ecology for trade and investment. And Mekong Ganga cooperation is a development cooperation. So it addresses the supply side constraint of countries in Mekong regions, especially the CLMV, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, and also the MSME in Thailand and India. So if we create the better ecology and we address the supply side constraint, then it have the potential that the trade and investment in the region will increase potentially. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing out the complementarity. Now, there is a second question by the same person. What are the specific issues that need to be addressed, overcome to improve the connectivity among BIMSTEC members? Would our colleagues from Manipur University like to address that? No, they are not here. Okay, I go back to our colleague from Thailand.
Yeah.
BIMSTEC connectivity, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador. For the under the BIMSTEC Master Plan for Transport Connectivity, 141 project has been identified, and of course the 100 more than 100 projects is on the road connectivity. The plan is very ambitious. I would say that 70% of this project, the source of budget has been identified, but there are another more than 50 projects that hasn't been, the source of budget has not been identified. That is one of the problems. And another thing is that the budget that has been estimated in each project is based on 2018 price level. So now it's 2020, so the cost is become underestimated. So this is the issue that, of course, the budget is the big issue for everything. So this is one of the big problem for implementation of the BIMSTEC Master Plan for Connectivity.
You know, Professor, I am of the belief that we should start with a lighthouse project. Let us have, let's say, Thailand as the chair, consult all the people and propose one project, and then let everybody focus their energies on finding funding, doing the DPR, making sure the feasibility, the bankable proposal. You know, unless you get one project going, you don't have the matrix of cooperation in place. So I think it will be very useful if Thailand takes that up as a lighthouse project after consulting everybody and use it which benefits the maximum number of BIMSTEC countries. I think that perhaps is the way to go. Now we find that there is a question by Lakshmi Priya. What are the possibilities for the India-ASEAN partnership to build an ASEAN economic order so as to address Asian problems like the crisis in Sri Lanka? Professor Nag, would you like to talk about it? But I think ASEAN is actually quite busy ignoring Sri Lanka. In fact, to be honest, the whole world is ignoring Sri Lanka, hoping India will take care of it. But I leave it to
it's a too much of expectations, actually. I think you were right. I think, you know, the most ASEAN as a group, if we go back to their history, there are also a lot of countries face different kinds of domestic challenges in the past, but they have come up and also now participated in an integrating process. And that experience is very important, that you know how actually you can talk to each other and try to resolve the problems. Some of the Asian countries are still under stress. And that's why, you know, their directions are extremely important. In case of Sri Lankan crisis, this is one thing you need to understand, that Colombo port is a hub port. A lot of ships which are coming from Middle East, from Africa, from Europe, before they reach to Singapore or some other ports in Southeast Asia, they might stop in Colombo port for refueling, right? So it's because it's a long journey. So that's why to keep Sri Lanka in a good economic conditions of Sri Lanka is necessary, and that needs to be understood. And I'm sure the leaders in ASEAN must be discussing at different forums, which might not have come in the public domain so much so, so that, you know, there is a kind of a you know, just an alternative thing. For example, in case of Russia-Ukraine war, a lot of countries are coming together. In some other countries, they are meeting the leaders and discussing. The same thing is not happening because it's not war, right? It's a regime change. So it's a different kind of a thing. So, but we need to understand humanitarian crisis could be because of war, could be because of some other issues. So I think that requires an immediate attention. So I think the question is having its own merit because, yes, we are not giving that much of importance.
Yes, you know, but for similar problem which Southeast Asia has faced in '98, for instance, you know, there is something called the Chiang Mai Initiative, which the APT, the ASEAN +3, tried to work out. But today, when the world is racked by new currency crisis, we don't hear much about the Chiang Mai crisis. So it is not that they are universal solutions to similar problems. Each problem needs to be strategically handled, and the lead has to be taken by the nearest geographical partner. I think geoeconomics cannot be forgotten. That is important, sir. Thank you. Now, I would request Professor Mahmood to answer the next question, which is from Sita Nokse. Some multinational enterprises operating in China may be looking to establish new production plants outside China as part of their strategy to strengthen supply chains. How can ASEAN countries and India harness the potential benefits of firm relocation from China?
Is me?
Yes, Professor Mahmood.
Yeah, thank you very
We
much.
haven't forgotten you, please. Just because you were the first doesn't mean we forget you in the end.
Okay, no, it's fine. Thank you. No, you're right. You also mentioned actually how Japan and Australia, they try to, you know, shift their plan from China to in a different part of the country, other, you know, East Asian country. So under China +1 or some other name. Yeah, so like it's called resilient supply chain. So yes, Japan, particularly for example, Japan is very keen to boost his car industry in India. So that is one issue. Of course, India wants to also increase this, pharmaceutical supply chain in Japan, Australia. So that other issue. And Japan has some other program is called Greater B program. So under this program, they want to invest in Bangladesh and this area. So Japan also try to, because they want to reduce their supply chain, highly dependent from China, and start to investing in Cambodia, Vietnam. So yes, there are huge opportunity basically for resilient supply chain and shift from some part of their plan from China to other part of the world, especially East Asia. India is the one of the important location. So my understanding the two issues is important for India. One is domestic front, one is international front. First, in the international front, the RCEP is the key issue. So if India join in the RCEP, then it will be the game changer. It will be the huge investment issues, and so that is the one issue. My understanding. Second, of course, India open up the economy, flexible FDI policy, and still the tariff is and non-tariff barriers is a major issues for India and some countries, like especially with the some developed country. So this too, if the India can reduce their these kinds of issues, that is the domestic FDI and other barriers that actually has some impact on attacking FDI, particularly from Japan and some other East Asian country. You see, the Singapore is increasing investment in India recently. Is number second actual after Mauritius. So it's a very interesting phenomena. So that is one. Second is the I think the RCEP, joining RCEP could be another important issues for India. So maybe India need to rethink about this. And there are, of course, we understand there are a lot of issues, joining this RCEP, but ultimately the long term, maybe short term, there's some pain, but the long term gain. So that could be the game changer for India, policy next 10 to 20 years. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mahmood, Professor Nag, our colleagues from Manipur University, and Dr. Leelawath. I really appreciate your presentation. Each one of you gave a different perspective and very cogent ideas. And as I had desired, I think you have thrown up the opportunities. You are not businessmen. The businessmen have to grasp these opportunities, but you have pointed them out. So in my concluding remarks, I would like to say three things. First, India is moving center stage on climate change and trade issues internationally. But please don't hold your breath on RCEP. India does not see RCEP as an able institution. India is more keen now to revalidate the India-ASEAN FTA, for which ASEAN must show greater commitment. That FTA and the existing FTA on services is enough for India and Southeast Asia to use the opportunities highlighted today. You don't need an RCEP with China in it for that. That point I want to be absolutely clear. Second, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is US-led and Japanese-guided, has 7 ASEAN countries and India in it out of 13 countries. Why don't we all talk to each other? What do we want from IPEF for our region, for us? And bring IPEF to do what we want rather than what the US wants. Third, strategic opportunities do not mean that we only have to follow the big powers. I think India and Southeast Asia and ASEAN countries do not engage bilaterally enough in the business to business level to actually carve out opportunities of the kind that have been mentioned today. I remember when I was ambassador to Indonesia, I had to tell Indian companies, please look at the India-ASEAN FTA and look at the stuff you produce. There are advantages, and most Indian companies, as Professor Leelawath pointed out, actually, they are very poor at using the FTA. So, to keep negotiating FTAs when your business is not going to use them is not a great idea. Like building a trilateral highway when you have nothing to export. So I think we need to put our horses and carts together before we go ahead, and that is how we will be able to have good economic cooperation and grasp opportunities better. Thank you very much, Indian Council of World Affairs, ASEAN India Center, and all the wonderful panelists for what I thought today was a very invigorating session. A very good afternoon to you all.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the speakers. We would break for lunch, and we would start at 2 o'clock Indian Standard Time for the next session. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.